Pointer. I'd like to talk today about how journalists can make copyright their friend. But first, I'd like to start with a poll. What do you think is the main problem journalists have with copyright today? And I'm going to give you three choices. Protects authors too much? Doesn't protect authors enough? I have no idea. Okay, let's find out. Who wants A? Copyright protects authors too much. It's too hard to get access to material. Who says A is the answer? Okay. And then it doesn't protect authors enough. People are stealing stuff on the internet. Who says that's the answer? More of you say that. Okay, how many of you say no? I have no idea. Okay, great. That's the greatest number. And let me say, we actually did a study at American University. We interviewed 80 journalists all over the country, and we found out the answer to this. And the correct answer is C. I have no idea. Journalists, in fact, the biggest problem that journalists have with copyright today is that they actually do not know the law well enough. And in particular, the part of the law they do not know, everybody but Ellen, is fair use, the right to use other people's copyrighted material without permission or payment under some circumstances. People normally conceive of copyright as the monopoly right, but actually copyright is a balanced collection of rights that both allows people to use copyrighted material and to get it, and to have some rights to it. What's weird about the confusion that journalists express is that in newsrooms across the country, as we learned in this study, people are using fair use every day without knowing it. They're quoting from think tank reports. They are incorporating social media into their work. They're really not even thinking about it. And the reason why they're not thinking about it is it was baked into their newsroom practice. But as we found out in this study, when journalists move into new platforms, they move onto the web, they move into using new kinds of media that they didn't used to use. They're very comfortable in print. They're less comfortable in audio. They're really not comfortable in video, understanding copyright rules. They are becoming hesitant. They get that look on their faces. They start saying, well, what am I supposed to do here? Is that okay? Is my editor going to like that? And are we in trouble? I don't want to get in trouble. So when they start getting that look on their face, the problem is that it leads to this. Journalists are the last people in the world who want to think that they are self-censoring. But in fact, this is what happens when you don't know whether you can do your work. You don't get your work done. Hesitation in journalism means delay, means not doing journalism, since time is of the essence. So this is actually a huge problem in journalism. This is a problem that links the First Amendment with copyright. And let me just walk you through that a little because it's not totally transparent. The reason why the First Amendment is linked with copyright is because the whole world is now copyrighted. Copyright is default, copyright is really long. We don't have the choice anymore to assume that something isn't copyrighted. There are a few exceptions, but basically your default position is everything that already exists is copyrighted. Copyright monopoly rights give copyright owners, whoever they may be, even whether they don't even know that they have the rights to that material, the capacity to lock up that material until they give you permission. So they become private censors of any future expression. How is the federal government in a country that has the First Amendment permitted to enable private censorship? How does that happen? It's legal because fair use exists. Fair use allows people to use copyrighted material without permission or payment under some circumstances. Great. I did not make this up. The Supreme Court has said that there is this link twice in the last decade. So if the Supreme Court is so enthusiastic about fair use, why does everybody in journalism look like that when they didn't already know what to do? Is that irrational behavior? Are journalists just a little clueless? I would say that that's actually rational behavior. And the reason it's rational behavior to be afraid is because they don't know what acceptable practice is. When you know what acceptable practice is, you are comfortable employing your First Amendment rights, as you are in issues that that also have limitations on your First Amendment rights in other areas, such as treason or obscenity or libel. But if you don't know what acceptable practice is, there are real penalties for guessing wrong in copyright. There are huge statutory damages. And even if you didn't pay those statutory damages, how happy do you think your editor is when you get into a lawsuit? So there are real issues here. And so it's not irrational for journalists to be afraid. So if it's not irrational, how come all of these organizations are so massively and enthusiastically employing fair use every day? What do they know that you don't? What they know is how judges currently think about fair use and how they've been thinking about fair use for the last 15 years. And I'm now going to share that with you. I'm going to share with you the 3 ways in which judges take the vague expression of fair use in the law with its 4 factors that nobody knows how to balance and nobody knows what it means, and turn it into something that they can use to make a judgment. The first question they ask is, are you reusing this work for a new purpose? So I'm giving you an example here. Mickey Mouse is copyrighted, and so is Spider-Man. Spider-Mouse draws from both. And Spider-Mouse is neither Mickey Mouse nor Spider-Man. Spider-Mouse is a new creature who depends on your knowledge of Mickey Mouse and Spider-Man to make sense of him and the joke that he is. So if he couldn't, he has employed fair use to refer to those elements that will signify Spider-Man and Mickey Mouse for you in turning him into Spider-Mouse. He has reused that material for a new purpose. The second question judges ask is, did you use the appropriate amount? Did you use what you need for that new purpose? So this is the Goldilocks principle. Did you match your amount of your using with what you needed to do? Not too little, not too much, just right. So you're not trying to use the least possible amount. You're trying to use the amount that most successfully matches that transformative purpose. Could be 100% in some cases. But you would have to have the reason. The reason would be transformative purpose, not transforming the thing, a new context. And you would match your appropriate amount to that. But the third thing that judges ask is, what are people doing in this field that they need to employ other people's copyrighted material to generate new culture? If they're not generating new culture, of course, they don't have access to fair use. But if they are generating new culture, we sure don't want to stop them because that's the heart of copyright law. So what does this field do? That third element of judicial thinking has been established by around a decade of really incredibly sound legal scholarship. And it is that legal scholarship and that awareness that led my co-author, Peter Jaszi, to the understanding that it would be helpful for people to establish consensus statements in their professional fields about what they need from fair use in particular situations, thus creating a comfort zone of acceptable practice in the most common areas. And I have been privileged to work with him for the last 10 years to do this with a variety of professional fields that started out with documentary filmmakers and went on to scholars of several kinds. This is one example. Poets who knew that they had fair use questions. They have questions about when is it okay to read my poem in a poetry slam? How much of my poem can you publish in an anthology? The English teachers, they were bringing copyrighted material into the classroom and sneaking it in and swearing their students not to tell anybody that they were using copyrighted material in the classroom so that they could teach from it. Librarians who employ fair use every day to serve their patrons, but were actually not able to help their patrons until they could understand what not only was accessible to them under fair use, but what the limitations were so that they knew when it stops. When they knew what acceptable practice was, as a result of harvesting the consensus of their community, they were able to work. So what happened when these and other organizations got consensus statements? Let me go to before. Before, these people all had, and we documented it, they all had the same problem journalists had, which is that they were self-censoring because they couldn't decide how best to access the world around them, the copyrighted world around them, in order to do their work. after that, they were able to get their work done more efficiently. They could just get down to doing their work without having to suffer anxiety, hesitation, and fear. But there's something else that's been really exciting, which is that these creative groups have been able to innovate because they've been able to not be stymied by their own insecurities and questions about what was right to do under the law. And that's, to me, the most exciting part. So you may say, well, what about all those large copyright holders whose material people are taking? Aren't they upset about this? Well, no, they are not. Why not? Because they themselves use these consensus standards very effectively. And they themselves value the power of fair use to do their own work. So here's the point at which I am breaking news. So I want everybody to get out their phones and tweet. The new news is that as of right now, it is 10 o'clock. As of right now, a website is going live at the Center for Social Media, centerforsocialmedia.org/journalism, to announce the release of a set of principles in fair use for journalism. And everybody in this room, I hope, has a copy. If you don't, pick one up from a friend or from the back of the room, or go to the website, centerforsocialmedia.org/journalism, and download a copy, especially download a copy for all of your colleagues. The set of principles was established in the same way we've established other consensus standards, by facilitating meetings around the country, in this case, 10 different cities around the country. We facilitated those meetings, but they were hosted by the Society for Professional Journalists and the Online News Association chapters. These organizations have endorsed it. We actually have received more endorsements, including from the National Lesbian and Gay Journalists Association as of last night at around 9 o'clock. We anticipate more rolling in today. And if your organization would like to become an endorser, we would love to hear from you as well. As you can see, these are major media associations. And I want to say the lead endorsing association, the very first endorsing association, was the Poynter Institute. And now I'm going to tell you what's in the code. No, I'm not. I'm not going to tell you those principles. The reason I'm not going to tell you those principles is that you can read. And that is probably the most important thing that anybody who is a journalist could do with these, is to actually put them to use. But I will tell you that these are the 7 situations in which journalists found that they most commonly needed fair use. And they needed for instance, when they were referring to a cultural artifact in commentary and criticism, when they happened to capture something in the background that was simply part of the scene, when they needed proof or illustration. One thing that is fairly new is I want to be able to make something available to the public so that they can also participate in making journalism with me and analyze these documents that I'm making available. And finally, the job of advancing the story, which journalists have done for as long as there's been journalism, but is now often referred to under the fancy name of aggregation. These are all common situations that require a good understanding of both the principle of fair use and the limitations. Where does fair use stop? The set of principles in fair use for journalism makes that available. So see these happy people? I hope that's you. I hope you are feeling much better. I hope you're thinking, great, because I think I understand how this is going to address a problem I used to have. Because I think what happens with this set of principles is that, first of all, you have a better understanding of how you can use the law responsibly, not only to make journalism, but to innovate. I think it allows you to share the consensus of your field with your editors, with your publishers, with your lawyers, because it's not enough that you think it's a great idea. They also need to understand, and when they hear it from you, they're like, yeah, sure. But it's a very different story when you say, we would be operating within the consensus of professional journalism to do this. So I really hope that you're able to do that. And I hope you're going to get right to tweeting this great news. But before that, let me end with another poll. What do we think is the best way for copyright to enable the future of journalism? let's lock everything up. Anybody for that? I don't think so. How about give everything away? Anybody in love with that concept? There's always one person. Okay, yeah, me neither. How about use all of the law? Well, let me tell you, that's the answer the Supreme Court wants you to choose. That's the answer the Poynter Institute wants you to choose, and that's the institute that I want you to choose. And I want you to choose it for a purely personal reason, because I have a blog on the Center for Social Media. I want to tell the stories that you are going to be able to share about how you are using fair use successfully within the law to be able to get your work done with less confusion. And if you do have those stories, we have a special email just for you, socialmedia.american.edu. Of course, you can also tell those stories to the Poynter Institute. We are going to have this presentation up on SlideShare. It's also up on our website. And if you want to just take the whole thing and show it to your colleagues at work, please do that. If you want to just excerpt some of it, well, go ahead and use fair use. Now you know how. Okay, thank you very much.